Hey guys, happy Tuesday. And here we go again. We're having a little technical difficulties, but you know what? It's the season to pivot, make changes, and not deal with disappointments. So I'm super excited that I have my good friend Alison here from North Carolina. Alison, welcome to Tuesday Talks.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks so much for having me. You gave me a reason to put some makeup on. I've been in self-quarantine for 12 days, so thank you.
2 days to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. So I just want to talk first a little bit about you as far as, so you guys get to know who Alison is. First of all, I'm going to notice right behind her head there, you see an Emmy.
Yeah.
So tell us about that Emmy real quick, because that gives us a lot about you.
That's the first Emmy that I ever won. The other ones are over on the bookshelf over here. But I keep that above my workspace to just for some inspiration. So I worked in television for 25 plus years. And I still kind of work in television. But I've been fortunate enough to do work that has earned me a few of those.
I love that. So today, and you're still working in TV, you're still doing stuff, but let's talk about one of the things, and I think this season we have going on right now in our world is a good time to talk about disappointments, about expectations of the way we thought life would be, about how to have adversity and change and rise up and help others with it. So tell us a little bit about your story and what you're doing. You have so many neat projects going on right now.
So the adversity, you're right. It's a crazy time for everybody for sure right now. And about 2 years ago, it's probably been about 3 now, I went through my own personal adversity storm, found myself in the middle of a divorce after being married for 23 years. And but had this moment of realization that I'm not the only one, right? We've all had those moments where we are hit with a life-altering disappointment or adversity. And it could be a health diagnosis, it could be a death, it could be a job loss, it could be a divorce, it could be a birthday. But something that really profoundly shifts the way that we view the world. And for a lot of people, that's happening right now, right? As we find ourselves confined to home and we're feeling the frustration and the disappointment in that. And what I realized is that we all have these mile markers, but so our pain, even though it feels personal to us, our pain is really universal. Our pain is not unique to us. What is unique to us is how we choose to rise above that pain and what we choose to do with those mile markers. And so I started mile marker 50, which was supposed to be my journey to visit 50 places I've never been the year I turned 50. That's this year, currently on hold. Enter more, temporary disappointment. But what I know is that these things pass. And so, yeah, I was really happy to come on today to talk about how do we get through that.
I love that. And I love that you gave it a name. It's your birthday. And even more disappointments coming with that,
Yeah, right. So I
love a trip.
Mm-hmm. I had to, my last trip number 8, got canceled or got cut short because of the coronavirus. We had to rush out of Europe to get back home before all of the bans. And everybody's been asking me, so what does this mean? And I don't know what it means yet. Sometimes I'm not quite ready to give up on the dream yet. I'm hoping that by the end of the year, maybe midsummer, that some travel can resume. So we'll see. That's still shaking out. But when I canceled the trips through April, I was going to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I was going to Barcelona at the end of the month with a good friend of mine. There was some disappointment. And I guess, for me, the first thing you have to do is to feel it. And that's okay. Like, I'm a pretty optimistic person. I try to stay very positive. And so sometimes I think that we feel like, oh, well, okay, I'm just going to act like it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. And we don't really acknowledge it's not fine. And so I had to take a little bit of that day and be like, this is stinks. Like, yeah, I mean, there was just, it's what I felt. I had to acknowledge it. You know, I've worked really hard for this, as I'm sure people who are shutting down businesses or losing opportunities that they've worked really hard for. It is disappointing, and that's okay. And I think you have to acknowledge it in order to get past it. And that's the first thing. So I say acknowledge, just don't wallow. You can't stay there.
I love that. So can we go back to prior to your trip, your divorce?
Yeah.
How do you go from, because I know I have a lot of friends right now that either recently going through divorces or trying to figure stuff out, or life has just handed them something like that. And it's like, how do you go from, acknowledging it, not wallowing it, and rising above? What steps did you take?
So one of the big ones that I think I had skipped over before in other disappointments, and this one really brought it home to me, and I realize it's applicable not just in divorce, but in any disappointment, is you have to, once you've accepted it and say, okay, I'm done, I'm not going to wallow, I got to move on, now what? You have to remind yourself that you are not a disappointment. And I say that because I think when I had my daughter, who's now 15, I went through a lot of infertility issues. And so there were a lot of disappointments in that, right? And there was a time I just thought, I'm broken. And so we transfer how we feel onto other people, and thought, I must be a disappointment to my husband in this. When I got the divorce, I was disappointed. So I thought, I must be a disappointment to my parents, who have been happily married for 50 plus years. And what you have to realize is you are not a disappointment. They might be disappointed right along with you, but that you are not a disappointment. And that subtle shift in how we look at ourselves, how we view ourselves, what we say to ourselves, the story that we're writing is really, really critical. So I think the first thing is to say that, to understand and to believe that we're not a disappointment, so that we don't transfer that to other people. And then I think you have to ground yourself, right? This is the reality check of your life. Whatever it is that is your disappointment, it's to look at what you have instead of focusing on what you don't. This is not the time for comparison. This is not the time to look and say, oh, let's say your kids disappoint you, right? Our kids disappoint us sometimes, but this is not the time to say, their kids are better than mine or making better choices. This is not the time to say, well, her husband doesn't disappoint her, or the time to say, look at what they're doing in their career. I should be there by now. So forget the comparison. This is the time to really take a look at what you do have. And this is where gratitude comes into play, right? And to be thankful for the things that we have. And you might have to do that more than once, depending on how big the disappointment is. It's not necessarily well, I tried that, it didn't work. I mean, when I was going through the divorce, I had to ground myself 50 times a day, to keep my sanity. Whereas if I get a rejection from a publisher about an article, I can ground myself and move on, right? So it kind of depends, because there's all sorts of ranges of disappointments that we feel in our life. And I think if things are really bad, then you have to pull out the at least sentence. And what I mean by that is, if I can't talk myself out of it. About 10 years ago, a friend of mine was going through a divorce, and she was at the house and had been crying, was really sad. My daughter was about 5, and she crawled up on her lap and she says, Auntie, are you sad today? And she said, yeah, baby, but I'll be fine. Don't worry about it. And my daughter said, well, at least your teeth aren't bleeding. My friend and I looked at each other and we were like, what? And we kind of started laughing. And over the years, it's become a joke, right? So, well, at least my teeth aren't bleeding. When I had to cancel the trips, I thought, well, at least I'm not sick. At least don't have somebody I love in a hospital who I can't come visit, right? So if you need to, you can find an at least that pulls you back from the disappointment and gives you a little bit of perspective. It doesn't make the disappointment hurt less, but it gives you some perspective for it.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think it adds a little humor to it. It's like if we can't add a little laughter, and in the midst of all of my trials, I've always tried to add a little laughter in there. And
oh my gosh, for
you have
sure.
to.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. That gives you it's that perspective. And that's why I think too, sometimes it helps to talk about our disappointments, not to where you feel like you're complaining about it, right? Like I'm not saying go on social. In fact, until an article I wrote came out in the Washington Post about my divorce, um, there were people, this was about a year after my divorce, it was the first time I had written about it publicly, who didn't even know I was divorced. So I'm not saying go on social media and share all your disappointments, but I'm saying find somebody you can talk to who can give you a different perspective, who can, exactly what you said, help you to laugh about it and find some humor in the situation. And kind of help, I think that kind of sets the groundwork for getting to the point that you talked about, which is, so then what do you do with it, right? So we have to learn from it. And if we have other people's perspective, if we're able to laugh, if we're able to stand back from it a little bit, that's where we can see, what do I need to do? How do I need to pivot, right? So if I didn't get a promotion, do I need to skill up? How do I want to reinvent myself after a divorce? What do I want my life to be? How do I give back?
Did you feel like you lost some of your identity?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean,
Because you were a wife, you were his wife, you were,
yeah. I mean, I realized I had not had my own dream, my own, for 2 decades. I mean, and that's not his fault. That was my choice. All my dreams were tied up in my family, in my child, in the work. And so what happened is I was getting a divorce at the same time I was leaving a 25-year career in TV. Everything that had been my dreams had circled around just kind of went, you know? And so, yeah, so I realized I hadn't had my own dream. So it's really important to figure out what that is in, how your dreams overlay with whatever your disappointment is, because that helps you figure out, well, what can I learn from this? Where do I go? What do I do with it now?
And I love how you did that. And that's why I really wanted you on here today, because I know so many people, especially like I said now, dealing with disappointments. I've seen people posting about their trips being canceled and everything going on. And I've had a couple people recently ask me, are you sad you're not going to Bahamas next month?
Yeah.
Sad you're not getting to hike the Grand
Your
Canyon?
hike.
Like, you know what? There was a moment
Yeah.
that it's sad that this happening in our world, that we have to deal with it. But you know what? That's just this much. My teeth are not bleeding.
Right. Right.
There's so much. Yeah.
We still have, I think disappointments make us feel like we're out of control. And that's really how I felt. I felt like when I got the divorce, which wasn't my decision, I had no control over anything. But the beauty of a disappointment is, if you feel like that, you have an opportunity to take back that control, right? You can still decide, I am still going to stick with what my physical goals were to make that hike happen. So maybe it's not going to happen in the way that you envisioned, but your goal of dropping the weight for your knees to be able to do a hike like that can still happen.
Exactly. People just, it's overthrow it all in. And it's like, no.
Right. And that's why, like, now you're seeing some great examples of people who, are disappointed because they've lost a job, who are super stressed out and disappointed that they can't do, high school seniors who can't go to prom and graduations and people whose wedding is being postponed because venues are canceling and they can't, so like, I get it. Like, and everybody's disappointment that they feel is real and valid and their own, but it is an opportunity to say, so what can we do instead? What do I want to do? And that, to me, helps you get past it because it gives you some control back.
Yes, because I think, I've been told that people that don't deal with those disappointments, it turns into a depression.
Yeah.
I think that's super scary this time. It's like, no, let's come back. I was talking to a friend this week, and she actually had to postpone her dad's funeral
Oh,
because people can't get together.
yeah.
And it's like, you know, that's the reality of what's going on right now. So
Yeah.
I
And
love.
it is crushing. And I think that's where it's important to acknowledge it, because if you don't, it will come out wonky later, right? You start being short with your spouse, you start yelling at your kids, because really you haven't dealt with it. And so, yeah, I mean, it's okay. She should feel sad. I would feel horribly sad and disappointed if that was happening. Um, but the good thing is disappointments, like the weather, do not last. They will change. It will pass. It will get better. It just will. And we have to remember that.
And I think sometimes God gives us those disappointments, those things that hurt, so that it's not happening to us, it's happening for us, and we're able to help someone else. We may not have the same situation, but your greatest loss and my greatest loss, we both have that hurt.
Yeah.
So it gives us that common ground. And I think if people really will connect with that during the season and say, you know what, I hear you, I see you, and feel for people, because I don't have that happening, but I had this happen.
Yeah. I saw somebody today posted this morning on social media. A friend of mine said, when my gym opens back up, I'm going to hug all those people. That this idea that we forget those, we've maybe forgotten some of those simple things that we kind of took for granted that we could do, the freedoms that we have. I will tell you that the next trip I take will be even sweeter than my first 8, because I will be so glad that I could do them, right? There was a video of a restaurant server. It was like one of those parody videos about how, they're going to be so excited when people come back that, like, you want 5 custom orders and 9 refills? You got it, because I'm happy to be here, And so these things that it's not always bad when it's
Right.
It's not what we expect to happen, but the outcome really is a different way of looking at things, and that there can be real value in that.
Yeah, I love that. So true. So tell us what you're working on now. Can we talk about, you got some books coming out?
We can talk about the book. I'm super excited about it. This is way out of my comfort zone. This is probably something that has been at least 7 years in the making for me, as I don't want to be an author per se, a children's book author, but I had these stories in my head that I used to tell my daughter. I used to picture, I was working full-time in news, and when I had her, my vision of bedtime was lovely and cuddly and so great. It was going to be this bonding moment, and it was so anything but that. And it was a struggle, and I was tired, and she, which I didn't know at the time, has ADD, so her attention spans like this. So everything was either too boring or not enough sparkle, she would say. And so I gave up, and I started just telling her stories that kept her engaged, that were about 5 minutes. And I thought some of them I would come downstairs, I'd be like, that one rocked. And then some I'd be like, oh, it was terrible. But, so so I wanted to tell these stories. I wanted to help parents who have kids with big imaginations and short attention spans to make bedtime a little bit easier. So, but I put it off. This is out of my wheelhouse. I didn't want to, I don't know why. When you're in my business as a writer, you're used to people editing you. You can always make things better. It's how I look at life. But for some reason, because these were stories I told my daughter, they felt very personal. And so rejections felt very hard. And finally, a couple of years ago, I decided, enough's enough. I'm not going to let this hold me back. And long story short, the book is coming out in the spring, The Adventures of Sid and Eli. It's stories that I told my daughter, Sid, and her based on her cousin at the time, who was about 6 months older than her, Eli, and they were completely different types of kids, but they were buddies. And so they're just fun. They're not overly educational. They have just enough good moral message to them, and a lot of imagination. So I'm super excited that that is coming out in May, The Adventures of Sid and Eli.
Will that be something that's announced on your business page? How will people?
Yes. So it'll be, you can follow me on Instagram, and we'll see what happens with all these 50 trips I'm supposed to take. _50. It will also be on _50 on Instagram or on Facebook as well. So I will announce
On there.
I'll be revealing the cover soon. I just got final sketches back, so it's getting real. It's like really going to happen, and I'm super excited to see this. It's my one thing where I tell you, if you are scared of it, do it, because I really, now that it's coming out, like when I see these sketches, I want to cry because I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this is really happening. And if I had been scared about that my whole life and missed those opportunities, it would have been one of the few things in my life that I regret. I don't have many in life. And so do it. And now's the time, y'all, you have time.
Right?
If there's something you've been wanting to do, you have the time to do it.
I love that. So you guys make sure you follow Alison, and I'll post all her links. They're posted all over my page already, but do follow her because her story is fantastic. Watching her travels, and now with the new books coming out, which as soon as that comes out, I'll have to have you back on here because I love supporting my friends, and I see myself buying quite a few of those and giving away. So
you can read them to your grandkids.
Yes. So one of the things I ask everybody is what book, and I know you've read a lot of books, and what book has had the greatest impact in your life?
Well, this was a hard question for me because I have a lot of books that I love, but I am going to say for this, You're a Badass by Jen Sincero, because I think it was a book to me that sounded like an old friend was talking to me. It was kind of the kick in the pants that I needed when I needed it. It kind of broke me. You talk about life after divorce, and I had some money issues around that I did not realize had creeped into my psyche about thinking, oh, you're doing just fine for a single working mom, and thinking that fine was all I needed to shoot for, right? I could pay my bills. I could take care of myself. That was, and so it helped me with some limiting money beliefs. And it's a really easy read, you guys. So for right now, I would say, as much as I love Brene Brown and Lisa Bevere and some other things, you have to be awake. You have to really be conscious. You have to be all in. This is just a great, easy read.
Yeah. So, I'll be giving a book away, you guys. So make sure you comment on here, audio or book, which one you would prefer. I'll either buy you an audio book, and I will be giving a book away next week for this. And then make sure you go follow Alison, either on or both on Instagram and Facebook. And, I love that you're able to recreate anything that's been lost in the past. And I know right now that's why we are having issues with Facebook and going live with Zoom, our app that we use, because everybody is recreating how they do life right now. And
Right.
Facebook and the using Zoom and webinars is everyone's using it now. So thank you guys for hanging out with us, and even though it wasn't live, watching our recording. And if you found it of value, will you guys put value in here? Will you share it and let someone know? Because I know there's so many people that your story could totally help. So I can't wait. 2 more days. She's out of
self-quarantine. Yeah, I never thought I'd say I'm looking forward to social distancing. Because at least I can get out of my house and see other people. So yes.
I love it. So,
2 days.
all right. Thank you.
Thanks.